Hello, viewers of America. Russ here. I just wanted to do this blog to tell you guys a little bit more about myself and my story, and where I was 4 or 5 years ago, and where I am now, weight-wise. So this is just a little blog just to tell you guys a little bit more about myself, and since we're taking this journey together, I just want you guys to know what's going on. So growing up, I was always the bigger kid. I was always the fat kid that everyone used to make fun of. For a big part of my life, it emotionally, no one wants to get made fun of, and especially when you're young, it's just one of those things that you have to accept. So all throughout high school, I, still remained the fat kid, and it was my senior year, and at my high school senior year, you have all these trips. You have the trip to the lake for the week, and everyone's has their beach bodies. We had a couple guys in my class that were called like the muscle boys or something like that, and they used to be like really yoked and had six packs and everything, and I was still hovering around 215 pounds, 220 pounds, around there, and I just didn't feel comfortable in my skin. So the summer before my senior year, I had a stomach ulcer, and to treat that stomach ulcer, I needed to take Pepto-Bismol and eat frequent feedings, which caused me to gain weight at that time because I didn't know how to control myself. So I was hovering around 220, and I decided that summer, I really need to lose weight, because that year I had the Lake Havasu trip, I had a Hawaii choir tour, and I had other things that I wanted to lose weight for. I didn't want to leave high school, the bigger guy. So I started to count my calories, I started to run, I started to work out, and do fitness circuits. The first month, I remember losing 30 pounds. I worked my butt off. I lifted, I ran maybe like 4 or 5 miles a day. I'd go home and for lunch and run 2 miles, and then take a shower at home, and then go back to school. And that was pretty much my life. I worked out. When you're in high school, there's nothing else to do but to have fun. You have all the time in the world, and you just work out. So by the end of senior year, graduation time before I started college, I lost quite a bit of weight. I was down to about I'd say 160, 165, and I kept that off pretty well. And then I started college, and I gained the freshman 15, more like freshman 20. All I ate was fried foods at our cafeteria where I dormed at. And I started to feel like I was gaining everything back. So I was probably around 175, 178. And then I started working out again. I started counting my calories again. I started eating high protein diets. I started taking supplements, and I started taking diet pills. I did everything from Hydroxycut, Lipo 6, Xenadrin. What else did I take? Redline, Rip Fuel. I was on Rip Fuel for a really long time, and I was doing No Explode to get bigger. And at that time, I got around to about like 160 again. And then after my first year of college, I took it up to another notch, and I was working out twice a day, 2.5 hours each, because I took a year off school, and I got to about 6% body fat, and I was like 146. And that was pretty much my life, working out. And I had 2 jobs at that time, so I was working, and so working out and work. And then nursing school started. When nursing school started, it's just started to get really busy, and I went from going to the gym 2 times a day to none at all. I didn't go to the gym for maybe a year and a half or something like that. And it was really frustrating because, school was really important, and I was paying like $35,000 a year on loans and for my tuition. And this is something that I really care about, and so I just spent time in my studies, engulfed in them. And I went from 250 to 260 to 70 to 80 to 90. And then the year before I graduated, I got up till about 230, my heaviest that I've ever been. And it was a really low point in my life as far as physical fitness and just emotional looks. I'm a pretty comfortable guy inside, but when it came to like going out, it was just nothing fit. None of my loose clothes before were like not even fitting anymore. I went from a size 28 to a size like 38, and I for a while I was wearing size 40 pants, and the biggest that I ever was in my life was 44, and actually I wore 46s once, and it's something that I'm not proud of. It's something that I never want to go through again, and that's why I'm on this journey. And so that's pretty much my story. I went from being the fat kid to being a guy that people looked up to, because he went from being the fat kid to being the skinny kid who had some muscle on him, who got into shape. And then I went from being that to someone who was even bigger than they were when they were fat. So I just became the really fat guy instead of the fat guy. And that's pretty much my story. I went to nursing school to learn how to help people, but I have to learn how to help myself. And that's why I don't want to be that nurse who, when I walk in, they think I don't know how to take care of myself, and how am I going to take care of them? So I've learned, the hard way, how it is to gain weight, how it is to lose weight, and I'm learning now how to take that weight back off. And this is something that I promise to myself now, is that I'm going to do this as natural as I can. No supplements. If I'm going to take protein powders, I'm going to take organic protein greens. And sometimes I'll probably take the whey protein, but I'm going to try to stay away from that kind of stuff, because I don't want to feed my body processed foods. That's why I want to encourage people to be as organic and as fresh as they can. And so that's my 29 cents of the day. But yeah, just stay fit and stay active, eat healthy. And I know, sometimes I'm gonna slip. I'm not saying I'm not going to. So but you have to control yourself, and I believe that I can, and I believe that all of you guys can too. So stay focused, stay motivated, stay fresh, stay natural, stay organic, and I'll keep you guys in touch with all my goals. And so that's my story. All right, y'all, I'm out. Peace and love.